my fair citizens, my name is Striderstone, I'm the mayor of Sodium City, and today is the day where we do our full set review. Okay, we're not doing a full set review. I never do full set reviews. If you're new here, now you know. I'll never do them. I think they're super boring, but also nobody cares about my opinion on all these commons that are not even draft playable. Literally no one cares. I don't care, you don't care, nobody cares, all right? So this is specifically the top 10 cards that I am excited to brew around. So it's more of a preview of what's to come in the next couple months. It's usually what it is. So we're going to go over each card. We're going to break each one down, say, hey, this is what I'm excited for. Here's what I'm going to pair it with. And it's just kind of up to you to go from there. But if you have any ideas, definitely let me know in the comments section below. But before you do that, make sure you tap that like button, attack that sub button, stay salty, enjoy. Starting off our list, we have Vesuvan Duplimancy. Now this is a really weird card. It's just a 4-mana enchantment that just kind of does nothing. It really does nothing. It relies on a lot of other cards, so I'm kind of skeptical about it, and that's why it's coming in at number 10. So what it does is it just says, whenever you cast a spell that targets only a single artifact or creature you control, create a token that's copied the artifact or creature, except it's not legendary. So obviously, the only logical thing to do with this is God Pharaoh statue and Mythos of Aluna, right? I mean, obviously, because if you get 5 God Pharaoh statues, they just can't do anything. You can put in Mirror Box too if you want to hard cast more than one. Do we want to do that? This is the only thing I can really think of off the top of my head. If you have any ideas for Vesuvan Duplimancy that's better than God Pharaoh statue, let me know in the comments section below, because that's easily the best one that I can think of. So coming in at number 9 on this list is going to be Urza Assembles the Titans. Now this probably should be higher on the list, to be honest, but whatever, it's here anyway. So it's a 5-mana saga with read ahead, which basically just means the saga can come in at whatever chapter you want it to come in at. But the first chapter is you get to scry 4, which is pretty nice, but for 5 mana, it's not really that great. But you get to reveal the top card of your library after that. If it's a planeswalker, you put it into your hand. That's kind of cool. So it's not a draw. It's not like a 4 scry 4 draw. The first chapter fucking sucks. Let's be real here. There's no sugarcoating it. It fucking sucks. All right. The second chapter, you may put a planeswalker card mana value 6 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. This is kind of nice because it's kind of like a cheating in a planeswalker thing, because you're never casting the planeswalker. But depending if you need a scry 4 first, you still get a free planeswalker the next turn. There's a couple things you can do with it, but we do definitely want to focus on putting a planeswalker onto the battlefield and what specific planeswalker we put on, because of the third chapter specifically, which is you can activate planeswalker's loyalty abilities 2 times this turn. So obviously there's a lot to digest here, but the best way to get the most use out of this card is to find a planeswalker that can ultimate after only using its loyalty ability 2 times. So basically when you put a planeswalker into the battlefield from chapter 2, chapter 3, activate it, and then ultimate. That's ideal. So for example, if you use 5 mana Kaya, that's most likely what I'm going to be doing. Use 5 mana Kaya. When she enters the battlefield, you do her +1. The next turn comes around, you can use her loyalty abilities twice, do her +1 again, and then you ultimate her, which means you get to do anything you want. You cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile, graveyard every single turn for free. Doesn't matter what the opponent does at that point, you're just casting everything for free. And since the Urza Assembled Titans is like, hey, you scry 4, and then if it's a planeswalker at the top, you get to put it in your hand. Most likely you're going to be running Super Friends at that point in time anyway. So you're going to have a lot of legendary spells to cast from the ultimate of 5 mana Kaya. I think it's going to be a really good combo. I don't know how effective it's going to be. I don't know how frequently you're going to be able to ultimate all these planeswalkers, because there's actually quite a few in the 5-6 mana range that ultimate after only doing the plus ability 2 times. So I'm really interested to see how frequently you can ultimate all of these planeswalkers. Because we can put like all 4, 5, 6 of them. I forget how many there is. There's like 5 or 6 of them in Magic Arena that all you need is to plus them twice and then you can ult them. Usually it takes 3 turns, but this time it's like, it's kind of good. Plus you can cheat in sagas using something like Thran's Temporal Gateway. You can cheat that in at the end of their turn and then put it into the battlefield and then plus and then plus and then extra plus. I don't know. You can do all sorts of stuff. It'll be super interesting to see what people do with this card. And by people, I mean me. I don't know. I'm sure somebody will think of something. I don't know. Coming in at number 8 on the list is going to be Stenn, Paranoid Partisan. Now it's a 2-mana legendary 2/2. I hate how all of these are legendary creatures. Like, all the good creatures in the set are legendary, which I guess is kind of the point. But regardless, whenever it enters the battlefield, you get to choose, other than creature or land, any type of spell. So enchantment, artifact, planeswalker, whatever it is, right? Any spell you cast of the chosen type costs 1 less. But it also has a 3-mana activation to exile it and then return to the battlefield at the end of the end step. This is really cool because not only can it protect itself, but it can also help you change whatever you want to do. So before their end step, the opponent's end step, so on their second main phase, you can use the 3 to blink it, and then on their end step, you can choose sorcery instead of enchantment, or instant instead of enchantment. You can do whatever you want. There's so many different cool things that you can do with it, but obviously, you'll most likely want to use it for saving your creature from an instant removal spell, or if you're using Wrath of God, you can pay 3 extra, or if it's marked for sorcery, Wrath of Gods are only 3 mana instead of 4, so you can pay 3, or you would start the Wrath for 3 and then pay 3 to blink it, have it in full control, so it's a 6 mana Wrath instead of a 4, but you still save your creature. We're just making it more complicated than it really needs to be. For the most part, it's just a nice little aura ramp spell that we're going to be using land destruction with. It's kind of cool, I guess. Ooh, all right, here is where it gets spicy. Number 7 on the list, a lucky number 7. I don't even, does anyone say that anymore? That's so fucking lame. Anyway, number 7 on the list, we have Sheoldered, I don't know, you know what I'm talking about. The Apocalypse. So usually I never play Praetors, but this one's actually really, really cheap. It's only 4 mana, and it's still 4/5 with Death Touch. So it's a great blocker, it's a great body, it does all sorts of things. But the special abilities is what we actually care about, because special abilities is what we're going to combo with. Now, there's obviously a ton of different things that you can use to combo with this, because the abilities are very, very, very good. So whenever you gain a life, whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. And whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. So obviously you can use Peer into the Abyss, you can use something like Phyrexian Arena, so when you draw cards, you gain life instead of losing a lot of life, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of things you can do. But we're doing something just a little bit special that maybe not a lot of people have thought about. So the cards that we're going to be using is going to be Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, which is the main win condition, but Lich's Mastery. That's the ticket. So Lich's Mastery is super, super cool. It's the linchpin of the whole deck, because whenever you gain a life, you draw that many cards based on how much life you gained. But again, Sheoldered, Gerard, whatever her name is, whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. So you gain 2 life, but since you gain 2 life, you draw 2 cards from Lich's Mastery, but Lich's Mastery, whenever you gain life, you draw that many cards. So you draw 2 more cards. Since you draw 2 cards, you gain 4 life, and you just draw 4 more cards, and then you draw 8 cards. You draw your entire deck. It's really what it is. So you need to make sure you have Jace, Wielder of Mysteries out, and then you can just win, literally, just from Jace. It's just the Jace passive. It's that simple. Granted, you have to have 3 cards. You have Gerald coming out, and then you throw out Jace, and then you throw out Lich's Mastery, and you win. It is on curve. It's 4, 5, 6, so it's not terrible, but you still have to keep a creature, a planeswalker, and then an enchantment alive 3 turns in a row. What's the worst that could happen? All I know is that we're going to do it at least once. And by do it at least once, I don't mean do more than one deck with it. I just mean we're going to get the combo done at least once. And if you want to see that combo being done, you got to hit that like button, subscribe button, all that stuff. And of course, number 6 on the list is going to be Jodah the Unifier. Now, I don't typically do 5-color decks, but this is a Wooburg 5/5 that says legendary creatures you control get +X/+X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. So this is always going to be a 6/6, obviously. But whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary non-land card and put it into the battlefield. So whenever you cast a non-legendary spell from your hand, so it's a lot like Sunbird's Invocation, exile the top cards from your library until you exile a non-legendary, non-land card with lesser mana value. Again, a lot like Sunbird's Invocation. But you may cast that without paying its mana cost. This is really cool. Obviously, I like it, but it does suck that it doesn't really give you an option, as it's just the first spell you get. You don't get a choice of like the top X cards like you do with Sunbird's Invocation, so I don't think it's nearly as good, but it's like having a second Sunbird's Invocation. So you could do, since it's 5 mana, you could do this on 5, and then you could do Sunbird's Invocation for 6, and it procs, maybe you can get something else. I don't know, there's a couple things you can do. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think it's gonna work, but it'll be fun to mess around with a little bit. Just a little bit, right? But outside of Jodah and Sunbird's Invocation, I'm not exactly sure what to put in the deck, but if you have any ideas, let me know in the comments section below. Clocking in at number 5, halfway through the list, we have Rivaz of the Claw, which is basically just a ramp spell for dragons. Now, normally I wouldn't have ramp spells in here because ramp spells are kind of just bleh, but whatever. I like dragons, okay? So it's just a 3 mana, 3/3 legendary warlock. It's not a dragon, which is unfortunate, but whatever. It does have Menace, which is also cool. It can just attack for stuff. Attacking with Menace can be very good early game if you're trying to kill a little baby planeswalker. It's very useful, all right? But it can tap to add 2 mana in any combination of colors, but can only spend that for dragons, which does also suck. However, there's a lot of really good dragon mana spells. So you have the Whelp, you also have Sarkhan. So the Whelp will make your stuff 1 perpetually cheaper, and Sarkhan will make all your dragons 1 perpetually cheaper as well. So even if your stuff dies, it gets discarded, whatever, they will always be cheaper. Now, the other amazing thing about Rivaz is every single turn, once per your turn, you can cast 1 dragon from your graveyard. This is just ridiculous because, once again, all your dragons get perpetual mana decrease from the Whelp and from Sarkhan. So your dragons are just non-stop threats. They have to exile your graveyard, or you're just going to win by natural selection. You can use Sarkhan's Unsealing for your board wipes. There's so many things you could do. It'll be really interesting to see if this can actually do something useful, but who knows? Who knows? It does help fit the curve because the Whelp is 2, Rivaz is 3, Sarkhan is 4, Dragon on 5, 6, 7. You're able to play Drakuseth for like 3 mana. You can play Drakuseth for like 4 mana. It's out of control. Dragons are coming back. Guaranteed. Okay, maybe not guaranteed, but dragons are coming back. Maybe. Probably. Hopefully. Yeah. Card number 4 on the list could have actually been number 1 on the list, but doesn't have any land destruction capabilities, so just by default had to go to number 4, right? And that's going to be Danitha, Benalia's Hope. Now, outside of just having a cool name of Danitha, it's just a 5 mana 4/4 with First Strike, Vigilance, Lifelink. There's a lot of stats, especially just for 5 mana. However, when it enters the battlefield, you get to put an aura or equipment from your hand or your graveyard into the battlefield. This is ridiculous. I am super happy that this card is existing. It's going to be insane. This card is going to be so good. If you're a real Magic player and you play real Magic, this card is going to be used. I can guarantee it. Now, keep in mind that this is an enter the battlefield effect, so there's a ton of ways to make this go off multiple times, but that could make this video go on all day, so I don't even want to go into all those options. But what we want to choose is very specific. There are amazing auras that a lot of people forget about because they're curses. Curses are very expensive, but they are also auras. So we have things like Cruel Reality. It's a 7 mana one. Cruel Reality is absolutely disgusting. 7 mana, but if you can get it for 5 mana, beautiful. Especially if it's already in the graveyard, like if they make you discard it, or if you're doing drawing and discarding, that's great. If they end up destroying it later on in the game, you can just get it back. But you also have Overwhelming Splendor, which is 8 mana, which just shuts down a ton of different aggro decks. So if you're playing a 4/4 with Lifelink and Vigilance, but also playing Overwhelming Splendor against an aggro deck, they basically just lost. There's just nothing they can do about it. But also, we can use Sinner's Judgment, which a lot of people forget about Sinner's Judgment. Granted, Sinner's Judgment has to be in the graveyard for that to work, but that's not too difficult to do because, you know, the regular Judge is just 3 mana, it's a creature blocker, so they'll probably end up killing it anyway, or you can kill it yourself. Nobody really cares about it, so you just pay 5 mana. That's just, in and of itself, it's a win condition, and you can put more win conditions onto the battlefield. The fact that it can get from your hand or the graveyard is just absolutely insane. This is a fantastic card. I refuse to think that this will not be used at a high level of Magic play, but this is definitely going to be used in a ton of jank. Now, number 3 on this list is going to be Braids, Arisen Nightmare. Now, this is a card that so many people are excited for. It's just a 3 mana 3/3. Unfortunately, it's legendary, but it's still good. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice any kind of permanent. If you do, an opponent has to sacrifice the same kind of permanent, or they lose 2 life and you draw a card. So this is really, really cool. There's quite a few things that we can do with this, but for the most part, we want to sacrifice lands to either force them to sacrifice lands, which most people probably won't do, unless we're also running land destruction on top of that. Then they're forced not to sacrifice lands and forced to take the damage, and then it's also a really good card draw engine. But if we can't do all of that, then they're really just forced to take the damage, or they can sacrifice the lands late game, and then we're just sacrificing our lands and delaying all of our late game stuff because we're sacrificing lands. It has some holes, all right? It has some holes, but we'll figure it out. You know, the artifacts, you can use treasures, but not a lot of people run a ton of artifacts. As far as enchantments go, you can run like Nico Eris and kick it for a bunch if you really want to do that. Creatures, you could use tokens like Dawn of Hope. I don't know what you want to do, but for the land specifically, we're going to want to run something like Gitrog Monster, so whenever a land goes into the graveyard, you get to draw a card. It's pretty cool. So you sacrifice, they lose 2 life because they don't want to sacrifice a land. Then we get to draw a card, but since we sacrifice it, we also draw another card. So every time we do it, we draw 2 cards. And then with Gitrog Monster out, we can play 2 lands. And then we have Crucible of Worlds, we can play lands out of the graveyard. It's all super important. We want to do all those things. Now, granted, all that stuff is going to require like 3 or 4 different cards. Is it practical? No. Is it going to be a Strider deck? Yeah. Oh, and before I forget, we can also use the Lithoform engine to copy the trigger at the end, so we can actually sacrifice 2 lands to make them lose 4 life and us draw 2 cards. There's a couple things we can do with it. I don't know. We're just getting ridiculous at this point. This deck is never going to work, but I'm excited to lose with it. That's all that matters. And number 2 on this list is going to be 2 cards, actually. It's going to be Zur Eternal Schemer and Golden Argosy. I have no idea if I'm saying that right. But Zur is an Esper mana 1/4 flyer that gives all of our enchantment creatures Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof. This is really cool, but it's a creature, so we don't like creatures. But the fact that it does have Hexproof helps a ton. But the part that we care most about this is the fact that it has an activated ability of 1 and a white to turn our Falvathran into a 6/6 creature. Now, obviously, you can do other enchantments, but the only thing we care about is Fall of the Thran. Now, this is when the Golden Argosy comes into play. This is just a 4-mana 3/6 vehicle with a crew 1 that whenever it attacks, you get to exile each creature that crewed this turn and then return them to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the next end step. Now, this is really cool because we turn the Fall of the Thran into a creature, right? We're going to crew this with Fall of the Thran, attack with the 3/6. It's not a 6/6, but it's still 3/6. We're going to bring back Fall of the Thran tapped, which is going to destroy all lands again, and then we literally do that every single turn. So they're never going to have any more than 1 land in the battlefield ever unless they have indestructible lands, which we'll kind of have to figure out a way to deal with that. But obviously we have to run indestructible lands. But that's the grand scheme, the grand plan, the mastermind, whatever you want to call it. But that's what we're going to be doing, or trying to do. Now, the card that I am most excited about is Chaotic Transformation. This is a 6-mana sorcery. It's only a rare, but it would be so much better if it was a mythic, obviously, because orange is much better than gold. But I'm still excited regardless of whatever it ends up being, because you get to exile up to 1 of every single permanent, but the owner of those permanents get to reveal the top card of their library until they get a permanent of that exact type and put it onto the battlefield. Now, this can work either against us or for us. We can target our own stuff if we really want to, but for the most part, we are going to use Weathered Runestone. This is going to prevent them to put any non-land permanent onto the battlefield. Now, unfortunately, we would prefer to use this for land destruction, but it doesn't work because there's no way to prevent people from putting lands onto the battlefield from their library. Unfortunately, I don't know why there's not a card like that. There just isn't. This will also be really easy to pair with something like Chaos Warp and just copy a bunch of spells to just brutalize anything that the opponent's trying to do. But we can also use Confounding Conundrum and copy the spell so that whenever 1 or more land comes into the battlefield, it goes back to their hand and it still kind of acts as land destruction in some kind of way. But at that point in time, it just kind of devolves into some giant, janky, weird thing that'll probably never work. But who knows? We'll figure it out.
Thank you all so much for watching. If you made it to this point, it means you either really enjoyed the video or you fell asleep and I'm waking you up now. Either way, thank you for all the support. I really do appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification, come out with videos 7 days a week.